Hey, in this video I would like to talk about Context API and global state management. When it comes to manage user profile, how we can approach this? We know that it must be accessible globally, most of the time inside every component. Imagine a very last component in the app. This component needs to display username that is currently signed in. Question is, where we manage this user exactly? Let's suppose in the app component. So to get username, we must pass it through the props to every next component all the way down the tree. But this is not cool. We have like 10 components above and every component is playing a role in that. This is called prop drilling, when some value is being passed down the props on a lot of levels deep. This is no good and should be avoided. To avoid prop drilling, there is Context API in React. It introduces the concept of provider and consumer. Provider is a component that provides all its children with some value or context. Consumer is a component that consumes the context and gets the value. Using Context API, we can easily manage our user in provider component and then consume it in any component we want to avoid prop drilling and intermediary components. We would create user context and put username as its value. Then we would wrap app component around user provider. So basically all components get access to the user context. To consume it inside the component where we need to get the context value, we would call useContext hook. In that way, we are able to get username from any place inside our app. There are no limitations of context usage. We are able to put it anywhere, in the app component, around homepage, around multi-page form, and so on. Alright, let's actually see how Context API works on the example of our chat application. Let's go. So under the source folder, let's create another folder that we will call context. And here we're gonna put all of our created context. Let's create new file and we will name it not maybe user context, but profile context. I think it is more suitable in our case. So let's put profile.context.js. So what is our strategy? We are going to create this context and we will put it inside our app component. So any other component inside our application can get access to it. So what do we need to do? To create a context, we simply need to call create context that comes from React package. So let's put it in a variable and let's say it is going to be profile context. Just like that. Now, we need to create a provider, a component that will provide all its children with this profile context. So let's put export const profile provider. And it is going to be a component, so this is going to be a function. Just like that. Alright, now what do we need to put here? What is going to return? It is going to return profile context dot provider, and then inside this provider we need to put all of our components, whatever we pass inside. So it is going to be our children. This profile provider is just a wrapper. So let's destructure it as a prop over here and put it inside provider component. Just like that. Alright, now if we hover, we can see React must be in scope. Alright, let me import React and we will get rid of this warning. Now, how we are able to actually do anything? So because this is a component, we can do our state management directly over here. Let's navigate to our private route. And here we know that we put this, for now, we put this Boolean value. This just false by default. So let's get rid of that. And here we will consume our context. So let's put this, let's say Boolean inside this context. We're gonna create, let's say profile and set profile as use state, which is going to be, let's say, a Boolean value for now, just to demonstrate how context works. In order to pass a value to this context, we need to put it as a prop to provider component over here. And we need to pass our profile just like that. And let's omit set profile. Let's just not destructure it. just like that. All right, we are ready to go. This is it. This is how we can manage our context. Now, to actually use it inside our app, inside our component, we need to put it here in an app component just around switch. So let's type what we named it, profile provider, and that's it. And the cool thing about context that it can be very customizable, because this is just a component. Let's say if we need to get user with specific ID, we can simply pass this user ID as a prop, and then we can grab it from props over here and then put our API call or any other state management related to this particular user ID. This is really, really cool. All right, now that we provided all of our components with profile provider, we now can consume it. So how we are able to do that? As you remember, I mentioned use context hook. So inside our private route, instead of doing this, we can simply do const profile equals use context that comes from React package. And then inside the brackets, inside parentheses, we need to specify context that we created. It is going to be this profile context. And it is really tedious to reference profile context every time we call it with use context. So to avoid that, we can create another hook, a wrapper for profile context to make it more accessible. So from profile context.js file, we're going to export const, let's say use profile hook, which is going to be use context profile context, just like that. And now it says that cannot be called, it is going to be a function that returns whatever this use context returns. And this use context returns us a value. So from our code, we can simply call use profile, and let's remove use context from here. And right now this profile is going to be this value that we passed over here. So now we can check if no profile, then we are going to redirect. So, and let's do exactly the same thing for public profile. So from here, instead of false, we're gonna put use profile, and that's basically it. Now I already launched the app. So if I refresh, nothing is changed. As you can see, if I try and access the home page, I'm being redirected to sign in. So nothing has been changed. However, now we manage our profile as, let's say, global state that we can access from any component, not only from public route. So every component that is inside profile provider can access its context, all right, with use context hook. And we created a wrapper around use context with profile context, which is use profile. So now it is even more user-friendly for us to access. Also, it is very important to mention that, let's say we created this profile context, or maybe let's imagine we created something like counter context. Let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all right? And inside our app, instead of using it like this, we use it multiple times. So let's say for sign-in page, we have, let's say, counter context, counter provider, like this, all right? And the same goes for home. So we have it like this. We now have two different contexts. Their definition is the same, but they are different. So if inside sign-in page, we, let's say, try and access context of counter, then we will get one value. If we try and access the same context with use context hook inside homepage, we will get another value, because they too have different states, all right? So it's like managing two separate states, but with one definition. That's just to point out that it is different. So that's basically it. In the next video, what we are going to do, we will continue working with our profile provider, and we will finally manage our signed in Firebase user. See you there.